Hello, this is the podcast host version of George checking in one last time for the Patreon bonus intro. If you're hearing this, it's because Best Little Horror House in Philly has ended, and I'm releasing the Patreon bonus episodes into the wild. These episodes only exist thanks to the very generous support of some listeners over the years, and I encourage you all to consider supporting an independent podcast this way, or independent art in general. As I mentioned, these episodes are coming from all over the podcast timeline. You'll hear the old intro sometimes, which is kind of a yardstick, but generally I am mentioning this because it means that they will have varying levels of audio quality. As I got better at hosting, so too did the technical aspects. While I certainly wish all the episodes were of the same standard that it reached near the end, I can't go back in time, and I felt it was better to release them this way than not at all, so I hope you enjoy. Hi, everybody. I'm George, and welcome to another Spotlight episode of the Best Little Horror House in Philly. This month, Paul Ritchey returns with a pick of his own after I made him listen to me jabber about Solaris for several hours. Welcome back, Paul.
Hey, George.
Really stoked to have you. This pick came out as kind of a circuitous path in that after watching Cure for the podcast, I was like, dang, this movie rocks. And I recommended it to you, and you were like, oh, wow, that did rock. And also, Koji Yakusho, who is the main guy, Takabe, in Cure, is also the main guy from a movie I love, 13 Assassins. So I watched it, and 13 Assassins did indeed rock, and so we got to talk about it.
I'm so glad that Koji led us here.
Hell yeah. He's great.
It's funny because I obviously knew Koji Yakusho from this, but I kind of didn't really so I watched him in this, but he's got a pretty different hairstyle. Obviously it's a period hairstyle. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know, I didn't recognize him in the movie right away, and then I was like, oh my god, that's the dude from 13 Assassins. And of course I loved him in Cure. He was what range, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I don't want to talk too much about Cure, but I do want to talk about the scene when he's talking to Mamiya in his little prison, and he lays face down, or is face down on a table, and does that whole up and down scene from that position. Man. Incredible. Yeah. I got chills thinking about it.
It's so good. Cure is really great. He really shoulders the burden of that movie, I think, in a really interesting way, because Mamiya, by his very nature, is very reserved and downplayed as a character. And so for him to feel still like a realistic detective, but also have to carry the emotionality of the movie, I think is definitely speaking very highly to the range that he shows.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I almost wanted to talk. I was going to talk about it more, but I will stop because we could probably just end up making this about Cure. Incredible movie. I'm so glad that you showed me that incredible movie. And I think you liked this. You said you liked this movie. So I'm glad that you liked this in return. I'm glad that Koji took us on another beautiful path.
He's completing the circle. I should specify that we're talking about Takashi Miike's remake of the 1963 movie of the same name. I'm curious if you remember the first time you saw this movie, if it stuck out to you at the time as a powerhouse, or if it was more of a sneaky longevity kind of thing.
Today was the 6th time that I've watched this movie. And it's a 2-hour movie. It's a little over 2 hours. So it's not it's a breezy 90-minute or 70 minutes or, anything sort of quick and, that you would think that we would watch it 6 times.
Yeah.
I watched this movie one night by myself, was fucking blown away by it. Because for me, and I'll just upfront say what I really love about this movie. I think this movie is a perfect action movie. Not quite in the same vibe as Die Hard, but I think it has that really I don't want to say tight because it's definitely meandering in the beginning, but it has a really great small story, right? The stakes are big somewhat, but it's pretty small and pretty contained. And I think it just goes, and once you get to the action sequence, it just goes.
Strap in, baby.
Yeah, you're going for a ride. So I loved it. I loved how every scene is just the length it needs to be to get you a little piece of story, and there's so many single shots he inserts inside of scenes to give you a little more story, and it's masterfully done. And the moment that this movie really started clicking perfectly for me, before even the action sequence started, was when they decide on their course of action and they're about to set out, and they're in that small room in front of a courtyard, a Japanese central courtyard, and it's beautiful and green outside and sunny, and they're talking and talking and talking, and then like when the scene turns to the moment of we're going, rain rolls in, and you hear that thunder slowly, and it rolls in, and the rain like perfectly hit time to it, like it's so controlled and so Hollywood almost, like to, in terms of how like much artifice there is there, but it's so perfectly timed, and then it just blends into the rain pulling up out of like a crane up out of the rainy dirty ground to the horses riding, and like the moment begins, right? And like there's so many sequences like that in this movie that I think are just masterful. I think it's just truly a masterful, like, he knows exactly where he wants his camera to go and sound to go and everything.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating the way it's handled, especially because at the very beginning, the violence does kind of feel like a slower build. A lot of the initial violence is kind of done off screen. There's a lot of communicating what's happening through sound design. And as the violence escalates, you start to understand more and more the stakes that are happening. Yeah. And when we finally hit the main action sequence, and it's just full out, literally like a lake of blood. At one point, there's an explosion of blood.
We were talking about this movie today. I was watching it with my partner, Jen, and she was like, oh, this is like a heist movie. And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of like opening heist movie, second half killing. And I call it Oceans of Blood 13 or something along those lines. I think that's what it was.
That's really good.
It literally rivers of blood in this movie.
Definitely.
And I love, to your point about the action, I think the action's really, like you said, in the very beginning, we see a harakiri, and we don't see really any blood. We don't see any violence.
It's all his face.
It's all his face.
Of it.
I watched his other movie, Harakiri. That's actually called Harakiri, which is another remake of an old samurai movie. And he does a similar sequence to that, except it's extended out by about 10 minutes.
Oh, man.
And it is brutal.
Oh,
and there's
I believe it.
Very little blood in it, and it's just, again, the face, and like I almost feel like he was like, this one was like a practice run for that one. But I think the violence is really, like you said, understated. And then there's a moment in that middle fight where they're first attacked by the Ronin, and the one spear guy stabs a guy and then throws him away with his spear, and you're like, oh, we got some fantasy in this shit.
Yeah. Yeah, I love, especially because that is one of the more explicit moments of violence. And we see also the way that it affects the youngest of the samurai and everything. And he sort of has to come to grips with the fact that he's shed his first blood and everything.
Yep.
It, like you said, just feels extremely controlled and deliberate. It would be very easy for this to tip over into feeling like an exploitation movie or something. Right. And it does still feel more restrained than that.
Yeah.
For people who don't know Takashi Miike, he's a Japanese filmmaker who's famous for over-the-top violence in movies like Audition, Ichi the Killer, and an episode of Masters of Horror that was so extreme it was banned from a show that was literally built to relax restrictions and provide creative freedom.
I didn't know that. That's incredible.
Imprint is the name of his episode for people who want to check it out.
Yes.
And Miike is actually a pretty big blind spot for me. Ichi the Killer, I just haven't gotten to, and Audition in particular, I'm like, well, it'll get picked for the show eventually.
Right, yes, right. Even Ichi the Killer, I would have thought would have been picked. But I feel like that had its moment in like the early 2000s, or whenever it came out, like mid-2000s. And it was like, that was a movie everybody talked about. And then it kind of quietly just went back into its little cult hole that it's going to live in until it explodes again, right?
Sure. Hey, who knows? Maybe someone will pick it for Blah Hip, and that'll be the spark.
Please.
But the only thing I had seen before we started chatting about this is his segment of the anthology movie Three Extremes.
Yes.
With Park Chan-wook and Fruit Chan. A very cool cross-country collaboration that they did. I really like that movie a lot.
You called it Three Extremes. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Oh, they must have done they did another movie together. Maybe it wasn't all the same directors, but he did a movie with two other directors called Tokyo, which was 3 shorts as well.
Wow. That's fun.
I believe it's called Tokyo.
I wonder if those are all people from Tokyo.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'll look it up. I'll find it. I think it's called Tokyo. It might be something else. I'm sorry. Anyways, I cut you off.
No problem. And yeah, Three Extremes is great, but the dude puts out an incredible amount of movies, though. As of 2019, he was doing an interview with Ebert.com about directing his 103rd movie.
We talked about this because of Cure, where we were like, oh my God, like you discover like a new Japanese director or any, like, new, but especially I feel like with Japanese directors, more times than not, when you discover a new Japanese director, you're going to be upset because they're going to have 100 movies. And you're going to be like, I would love that there is so much, but what the hell, how am I going to fit this into my life? And
how do I dig through? What's the good stuff? What's the separate the wheat from the chaff kind of stuff?
Exactly. And I think I didn't even know about this term, but V-horror, right, is the term. So there's a lot of made for TV horrors.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it was interesting because the import-export ability of VHS compared to film was such a boon to international horror in particular, but also action movies, in terms of being able to make its way over to America, find a foothold, and then be able to expand a little bit. Mm-hmm. And, you see that with things like Ring and The Grudge and everything, and how they got all these American remakes and stuff. But beyond just remakes, a lot of these movies tended to just have influence that would then kind of circle back around, because the American movies would then come back in, that had been influenced, would then come back into Japan and all these other Asian countries and re-influence those directors who were getting their hands on these new movies. Uh-huh. But what makes Miike in particular very interesting to me is that rather than rest on his laurels like a hack, putting out the same movie over and over again, he is really all over the place. He has this signature that people expect, like a lot of over-the-top blood from him, but if you go through the filmography, there really is a lot of range in there. And I was going through, he literally even adapted both the Yakuza and Phoenix Wright video game series.
Yes. I've seen those in the posters in his letterbox, and I'm always like, maybe one day.
Well, I watched the Ace Attorney movie.
How was it?
Here's the thing. It is extremely accurate to both a fault and a positive.
Yes. Isn't that just the way with video game movies most times?
Yes, exactly. It feels very static because it is mostly in the courtroom, but they really were like, no, silly hair is going on every single character. Mm-hmm. So they do a good job of replicating it, but they almost replicate it a little too accurately. It's basically what I think.
That's a shame, but I think it's cool that they tried.
Yeah, that's and you know what? I'm going to check out the Yakuza one too. So I'll check that out, and who knows? Maybe that'll be amazing.
So I just watched another movie by Miike. Also, I think I was wrong about that Tokyo movie. I can't remember what director it is. I'm thinking of that's on there. But anyways, I just watched another movie called First Love. It's a very recent Miike movie.
Right.
It actually has the young samurai from this who deals with the first killing. Is the lead in that, and that. You're talking about Yakuza vibes. It feels like a Guy Ritchie movie mixed with, I guess, a Takashi Miike movie. It honestly feels like it feels like he brought in like the Guy Ritchie like seedy underworld movie.
Wow, that rules.
It kind of rocks. It's not. I wouldn't say it was great. I would say it's good, but it's a different vibe. And I also watched that Harakiri. And to your point about expectations of Miike, obviously through most of his early movies were very bloody and very gory. And Harakiri, the original, has a very long fight sequence. So in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to watch this remake, and the end sequence is going to be on par with 13 Assassins' end sequence. And I don't want to spoil too much, but he circumvents his own style by making changes to the original in a thing that I thought were really interesting, where almost he wasn't so much that he was trying to circumvent what happened in the original movie, but more so to circumvent what you expected from his version of that movie, which I thought was really cool.
That rules.
Yeah.
I love when directors are kind of self-aware of that and sort of play with that expectation. I think that happened a lot with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Really feels like sort of messing with the audience expectation of what you'd expect until the very end when he goes, actually, this is what I like doing. So I'm going to do it.
Yep.
But that's cool. Also, Takashi says that Starship Troopers is his favorite movie.
Oh, hell yes.
Love that for him.
It's funny because when I watch these, I'm always like, oh, man, he obviously loves Quentin. Like, I feel like there's a lot of Quentin love in there.
Yeah.
But I never expected that. That's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's a movie that will definitely get talked about at some point. It's a favorite of mine.
Me too.
I love Verhoeven, that Dutch weirdo.
I love that movie because I love that Dutch freak. I do love that, like, that movie hit 13-year-old me, or however old I was when I saw it, in a totally different way than it did adult me, but both were very beautiful and valid experiences, you know?
Yeah, it definitely does. It's it's almost like too good of a satire in that it definitely goes over the head of some people. And then when you do get the satire, you go, oh, this is really clicking on way more levels than I first anticipated.
Yep.
I love it. It's a great movie.
Yep.
So no surprise to me that it is his favorite movie. But
And also with the buckets of blood.
yeah, definitely so. I did also find this interesting quote about his opinion on violence, which, like I said, does tend to be a recurring element in his movies.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, what I consider to be particularly violent is a Hollywood film that has a scene where, to show off how amazingly buff and manly the superhero star is, everyone around him has to die. Killing off the new actors in smaller parts, extras, they all have to die so they can show how strong the lead character is. That is really violent to me because the violence is based on if you're a star, you'll live. And if you're not, you're expendable. As opposed to, and I'm out of the quote now, the main character focused violence that shows their strength through endurance that Miike tends to focus on.
Interesting point. Wow. Yes. I love that. I love that because this movie I think is an interesting, and I thought Harakiri was also like that. I think both movies are obviously real. Well, we can't talk too much about Harakiri, but this one is definitely questioning the samurai myth, the samurai code, quote unquote. You know, like what is real about it. You know, like it's very like, and I think samurai movies and cowboy movies obviously are very extremely interconnected through the process that you talked about earlier about sharing back and forth. But I also think it's interesting because they're both kind of about a similar archetype of myth, right? Like the great American myth of the cowboy and the great Japanese myth of the... Now, samurai, I think, were a little more real than cowboys were. But I think they're both kind of like struggling with a weird sort of honor, right?
Yeah.
And I thought this movie was so interesting because it's kind of a cool deconstruction of that. It's also a celebration of the samurai, but it's also like a cool like populist movie, right? Like the ending is definitely like a very populist message coming straight from Shinzaemon, right? Like, like he's just laying it out for you.
Yeah, no beating around the bush for sure. Since we're diverging from strictly horror in this spotlight episode, I thought it would be fun to discuss the actual genre this falls into, which is the Chanbara film, aka the samurai film. Although strictly speaking, Chanbara translates into sword fighting movie. Some of the more famous ones, of course, are the Zatoichi series, Lone Wolf and Cub, Lady Snowblood, which is a favorite of mine, and the inspiration for a huge chunk of Kill Bill.
Yep.
You know, again, speaking of that Quentin Tarantino switching back and forth.
Even going so far as to take the theme from the movie and just put it in there.
Yeah, I say inspiration. Blatant theft is really more.
Loving theft. Extremely loving theft.
Are you into this genre at large?
Yes, definitely. I definitely am a big old dork for samurai movies. Like I said, I watched this and then I made Jen watch it the next day. She was not super interested in it. And then we watched it again today, and it was almost like watching it for the first time. She liked it a lot more. Then I showed it to, I guess, 3 other people I've shown it to as well. One of which is Kevin Cole, a person who has been on your podcast. And I will talk about the moment that I think this movie really clicked for Kevin Cole, because it's a big moment that I'm sure we both loved. But yeah, I do love these movies. I love Lady Snowblood. And I enjoy like a Harakiri. Like, I liked that movie a lot, the original. And it's like a bar setter, right, for this genre. But I really do like the ones that border, like Lady Snowblood, that border on the exploitation. You know, yes. I like those ones a little more, and that's kind of what I'm here for. And I think that's why I like this one, because like I love Seven Samurai. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. But like this hits in a way that a very different way from Seven Samurai. And I don't want to don't get it twisted. I'm not trying to say this is better than Seven Samurai, but I think that this for me is a movie that I could watch more times than Seven Samurai. You know,
that makes a lot of sense to me.
I said that and I feel dirty, but I kind of mean it. I don't know. In the moment, I mean it. Yes.
I honestly, I'm inclined to agree. I think that this, I watched it for a second time today while I was just kind of chilling, and I think it really is pretty rewatchable, especially because it does hit that moment where it becomes just kind of like an extended action sequence, and you can kind of just zone out, soak it in kind of thing. Mm-hmm. I think once it hits that point, it really becomes kind of like an avalanche of just being swept up in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you pick up, because we were talking about how this isn't a horror movie, but obviously Miike is a horror director, kind of, right? Like mostly a horror director. Did you pick up on like those moments of horror throughout it? Because I feel like there's at least like 2 or 3 like pretty significant horror moments, right?
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I said, this is a divergence, but not entirely. I mean, the poor woman that I mean we'll talk about, but the woman who was punished for her father's sins was certainly a moment of horror. I think there are a few moments of supernatural elements that kind of come into play as well that are interesting.
During the fight sequence when the Ronin, I forget his name, but the Ronin samurai is killing the man with a rock. I found that, and it turns on its side, the aspect ratio. And I love, like, there's the, like, burnt samurai who comes by to attack him, and, like, he looks like zombie, like, and he's cackling and stuff like that. Very, like, almost shades of Tetsuo the Iron Man there, right?
Definitely. And I think that even just some of the camera movement tends to accentuate that. You know, at some points, it does become handheld, and it gets a little shaky, and he really gets up in it. The action becomes very intense in those moments.
Yeah.
We've already talked about the interplay between other genres like gangster movies and Westerns in particular, and you'd see Seven Samurai influencing the Magnificent Seven or basically being a remake, and then that would come over. And these Chanbara films also tended to be period pieces. And Miike had this to say about that, which I also found interesting. He said, "The story takes place in the 1840s, near the end of the Edo period, but some things never change. Mankind is always in pain, no matter what the age, place, or political system. I don't need to insert contemporary themes into the film. These samurai speak to us even though we are not samurai." That, for me, is the beauty of these period films. Perhaps the samurai genre is unique, even though we Japanese live in an international world where we share the same information and use the same products. But then again, you could compare samurai movies to Westerns in that they're both long-lasting genres in which the characters and the audience are mainly men. As men, we want to see some kind of ideal of masculinity, even though modern society might restrict us in our own lives. And so to him, these are just a way of allowing a healthy release of dude's rock energy.
And this movie is that. This movie is Dude Rock's energy. And, like, you sent me the picture of the squad, and I'm just like, there's my Total Massacre squad. You know, like, and, like, sometimes you just, it is cathartic, this movie.
Yeah.
In, like, a real shithead is causing some problems, like we see in our regular life all the time. And it's like, wouldn't it be great if some people could do something about that?
Yes.
You know?
You know, it's hanging with the boys. Like you said, this Total Massacre squad. And he really was all in on Dude's Rock because, again, this is a quote. He said, "I felt that all of us working on our remake of 13 Assassins had to honor the original director, Eiichi Kudo, and everyone else who created the original. It was important to avoid doing what most modern-day Chanbara do, which is to insert a love story or interpose modern-day mindsets." And to this, he was specifically referring to several remakes of Kurosawa films that he regarded as failures. So he was like, this has just got to be really honoring what it was. It's about these guys and their honor and their rage against the system.
Yep. Fighting the system from within while using the honor of their own system, right?
That's right.
And
that's
like
right.
and the interplay, that's the most interesting aspect of this is Shinzaemon and between him and Hanbei. Like it's you know, like that's for me the most interesting aspect is like watching these two people with the same code but how they interpret it, right?
Definitely. As far as the actual production of the movie, they had their own little Total Massacre squad because this is the third movie with Miike, Takayuki Yamada, and Susuke Takayoka working together after Crows 0, 1, and 2. The name of the movie is Crows 0.
Okay.
And there are two of them.
Never seen that one. Cool.
And Miike had also worked with producers Toshiaki Nakazawa and Jeremy Thomas. So that's 5. That's a quorum of assassins.
Yes, it is. A murder of assassins.
This was also filmed in northern Japan during the summer of 2009. One last quote from Miike here where he said, "I wanted to make 13 Assassins in the old manner, to use old techniques and not rely on modern day ones such as CGI or editing that changes the speed. We only had 2 weeks to film, and the weather up in Yamagata Prefecture in the north, where we built the set for the village where the climactic battle takes place, was pretty bad. The actors did surprisingly well, considering that more than half of the main 13 had never held a sword or ridden a horse."
Wow.
And then he finishes saying they were fighting for their lives as actors.
Incredible. I didn't know that. He fooled me. Good job. The magic trick was successful because I thought that every one of them had some. I was like, damn, all these dudes had to do some serious training because they're all pretty damn good at it. Wow.
Yeah, he does a great job with it. And I will say, I have to put a tiny footnote in there because he did say later there is some CGI. He
Of
just
course.
meant using as little as possible.
Yeah, there's some obvious CGI and like not that it looks bad, but it's just like very dated of that 2010 this came out.
Yeah, right.
Like and I'm sure we'll talk about those specific moments, but I don't think it looks too bad. I think there's a good attempt at covering it up with like not even darkness, but like smoke and mist and things like that.
Absolutely. And it came out, made $17.5 million on a $6 million budget. Hell yeah, we love a mid-budget king.
Love it.
Critics loved it too, even old Raj Ebert. And it got 10 nominations for the Japanese equivalent of the Oscars, the Japanese Academy Prize, winning 4 of them, mostly in production side stuff. But the nominations included Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor for Koji Yakusho.
Ah, our boy.
Hell yeah.
And he's great in this. I feel like he doesn't have as much. He has a lot to do, but he doesn't have to go as. He's got a big old cast around him to lean on in this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like you said, it does feel a little like those Ocean's movies in that there are definitely people who take the foreground, but it is still an ensemble movie on some level in that they still have to like spend the time introducing everyone and why they're part of this gang and everything. So Danny Ocean, as it were, still is the main guy, but he takes the background of every now and then.
Right. But he's still like, Koji in this is like a lion, right? Like leading a pack. There's like some moments where it's just like he comes to the forefront and his power is just there. I can think of like 2 or 3 sequences where you're just like, oh, especially the total massacre moment is an incredible sequence.
Absolutely. Well, let's get into the movie. So it does start on March 5th, 1844. The Akashi clan house elder Zusho Mamiya, again Mamiya, commits harakiri to the Akashi shogun in protest of the cruel Lord Naritsugu. The problem is, Lord Naritsugu is the shogun's half-brother and recently appointed to be a senior advisor. Like we said, this is very ritualistic, very slow, really focuses on his face and the pain that he's feeling as opposed to the gore of it.
Yep.
The shogun orders that this be settled quietly, and so we cut to Shinzemon Shimada casually fishing, a.k.a. Shinza, he's called, and Sir Doi, the shogun representative, has called him to talk with Yuki Makino, a subject of Lord Owaru in Kiso, which was a lot of Japanese words that I just said in there. But basically, he's just like, let's talk about how you can help me out with this.
Anytime I start watching a Japanese movie and I'm maybe not in the mindset, like that, watching this for the first time, especially reading subtitles, you're like, it's a lot of names. A lot of names in a language that I'm not familiar with, and I've got to keep up.
Yeah, especially a movie like this where it is building like a squad of people, and you're like, okay, let me really try and absorb all these.
It seems like a lot. It seemed like a lot the first time I watched it, and then every time I've watched it since, obviously, it really is it's a pretty simple story. Like, it's surprisingly, it seems complex, but it's actually very, very simple once you like kind of have a grasp over like, okay, there's like 4 major players going on here, right?
Yeah, definitely. And they discuss a scandal from last year where Lord Naritsugu stayed in Kiso and raped Chise, Makino's daughter-in-law, and killed his son. Again, really great sound design here. It's how a lot of the violence is communicated thus far. We hear his head drop from his neck off screen. Yeah. Really, really great stuff.
After he does a terrible job, Naritsugu, of not being good with his sword, we're instantly we're shown that this person is a sick and twisted person, but also completely talentless in regards to like being able to like actually enforce their wicked whims, Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, later on we'll see he's shooting arrows from point blank and
missing
still.
Yep.
Chise killed herself in disgrace, and Makino himself strongly considered it, but held on sort of as a witness to the atrocity that had been committed. And Doi takes Shinza aside and goes, I can't do anything about this and destroy the peace, but I sure wish somebody would take this guy out. Big wink.
I wish someone would rid me of this troublesome. What is it, senator? What's it?
Shakespeare. Yeah. I can't remember what the actual quote is.
I'm losing the actual quote, but we know what we're talking about. Yes, we do. Listeners, trust us. We know what we're talking about.
Doi also shows him the daughter of a peasant leader who revolted against the land taxes that were starving them. She was brought to Ito as Lord Naratsugu's plaything after having all 4 limbs and tongue cut out by Naratsugu. But then he got bored and kicked her out in the street. And, truly this is horrific.
Yeah.
So fucked up, just the emotionality of it, the slobber
drool
from the cut out
and
tongue and everything.
I think she's bleeding from her eyes too.
Yeah.
Or it looks almost like makeup, but I believe it's blood coming from her eye sockets and some CG here, We have some CG here, but I think the way it's shot, it has this surreal feeling to it that, I think elevates it to a creepier feeling, even if it had been fully prosthetic, or I don't know, I guess you wouldn't be unless you had someone who actually had a quadruple amputee. Yeah
To your point earlier, there is a few moments here and there of sort of fantasy where it does sort of feel like it pushes past what our normal reality might be into, oh, she's crying blood because of the pure rage that she feels and the massacre she went through and everything. It really does work really well for me. And Shinza asks, what of your family? And she has to write she has to use her mouth to paint because she obviously doesn't have her hands and she can't speak because she doesn't have a tongue. Total massacre. This is both an answer and a command.
Yep. And I love this build up to his motivation where, to your point about this being a male action movie and dude squad and stuff like that, this is a point in time where these samurai are almost effectively neutered, right? They don't have it's a time of peace, which for most people is a great thing. For the majority of the people, it's beautiful that it's a time of peace, but for this people that are basing their entire life on the honor of dying nobly in combat, which I just watched The Northman and I was like, wow, that's a fun connection of, these people that don't feel like they will die a good death if they die of old age. He's living through this moment, right? And he's feeling neutered, and maybe that would have been enough, for him to go on a suicide mission. But I love this buildup of let me tell you this story. This is what happened to my family. And he's obviously extremely affected by this, but then he sees this, right? And this is what sells him on this mission, right? He's I will go. This is a worthy mission, and it's worthy of me dying and having an honorable death during this.
Yeah, I can't wait to try and kill this bastard.
Yep. Let me at him.
Next, we do meet Hanbei, who is Naratsugu's chief samurai and his bodyguard and advisor and all that jazz. And he's pissed that the Mamiya family has been taken by Naratsugu and slaughtered casually despite government wishes. Like I said, he's shooting these people from point blank, including torturing a kid by making them go last and also missing at first. Hanbei sends a spy to check out Doi, who he thinks must be plotting something based on how easily things went for Naratsugu, which I think is funny that he's like, this went too well for us.
But I love that that's that's the beginning of it's a heist movie, but it's also a masterminds against each other movie.
The chess game.
The chess game of two minds working against each other, and it's plans within plans, right? And understanding that what are the known unknowns here? We know that there's something that we don't know about how these people are acting.
Yeah, absolutely. And he sends some spies to get a list of visitors, sends the Harakiri, and he's pissed it's Shinza, who he knows from training together, and he's like, this guy will never give up. He's like a bulldog, basically.
I love that. He's not smarter than me, and he's not a better fighter than me, but he never stops. And he's he's the type that beats you in the end.
Yeah, you can't draw him out. You can't force him to make mistakes. Cut back to the man himself doing some nice gardening.
Doing some beautiful gardening, showing just how meticulous of and beautiful of a man Shinzaimon is, and Koji Yakusho. We just needed more shots of Koji in this movie, honestly.
Absolutely. Yeah, the one flaw. And he goes to talk with Hirayama, his student that also uses his dojo. Hirayama wants to pay him back, and so he joins the team of assassins, which is 5 additional men chosen from hundreds to assist Shinza, which now puts them at 9 total. They have just a month to assassinate Naratsugu within Ito, because if he enters Akashi land, he's untouchable, they say. Puts a nice ticking clock on things.
I love a nice ticking clock. Really, gives you just a clear motivation for all these characters. We got to get this thing done. And I think even though this movie does move very slowly, I think that the stakes are very obvious throughout, and like the importance of every shot really just carries through, because you're just like you're like, I know, like you're seeing something happen and you're like, I know how this fits into the puzzle piece of how they have to accomplish their mission.
Yeah, it builds perfectly.
Yeah.
One of the samurai is ambushed by Akashi samurai outside the meeting, trying to figure out what's going on. And Hirayama saves that guy's ass real quick.
Love that sequence where just where they like ask him who he is. Ronin. Just like beautiful like line delivery, and then just a smooth like butter murder of 4 men.
Yeah, they go, oh, he killed him in one slash. It's like, goddamn, Hirayama killing it.
Incredible throughout.
Definitely. Meanwhile, Shinza's nephew, Shinrokuro, is drunk as hell in a gambling den. He's partying it up when Shinza comes to visit, and he says, shape up and join us for the ultimate gamble, you bum.
I love this sequence, and I love this relationship, because I think through his nephew, we learn a lot about I think we just we get a lot of examinations of samurai code and life. And I love that Koji Shinzaemon is, I love how loving and soft he is with his nephew, because he shows up and he's like, puts him in his place. He's like, you're not acting like a samurai. You're being drunk. You're not with your wife. You know, you're out partying and stuff like that, and gambling, hanging out with the Yakuza. And he could really stick it to him, you know, but he's nice. He's like, you don't have to act big. He's like, you can just be you, but take your shit seriously. Like, take your life seriously. Not take being a samurai seriously. Take your life seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that he does a really great job, especially of kind of encapsulating the transitory period that this takes place in as well. You know, we see him sort of resisting the samurai life, and maybe that's partially because they're in a time of peace. And so this idea of sort of putting himself in a position to feel that uselessness that they're kind of playing with, and that I think even Naratsugu kind of approaches in terms of like feeling like he's bringing back the code that like wives are supposed to die for their husbands, and servants are supposed to die for their masters. That's just the way it is. And I think that he does a great job of kind of encapsulating the doubts of that transition.
Yeah. I think, and you know, I don't have a huge knowledge of Japanese culture or anything like that. I don't want to be, I guess, picking this movie apart from an American perspective, obviously, because it's made in a totally different culture with different things that are important and different statements they're trying to make. But I did sort of read a little bit of this, like, kind of like, I think it was the 90s, right, that Japan had an economic slowdown, a major economic slowdown. And it's sort of like this, I think there's a little bit of an examination of like a lost generation almost, you know? Like, Shinro is like ultimately a lost generation, probably like last generation of samurai.
Yeah.
To sort of be able to kind of live off of that, but really, most likely in the next couple decades, that stuff was all going to fall apart, and then their jobs and we see that a little bit in well, I guess we see it in Harakiri, but it is, I believe, earlier. But anyways, I think that it's a fun, not fun, but it's an interesting like look into like kind of a lost generation, and I think there might be a little bit of that. Now I don't know, because obviously this is made in 2010, so like I don't know how much that is top of mind for the Japanese people in 2010. You know,
yeah,
I would imagine there's a little bit of that though, right? Like.
No, definitely. I think you can even see it just in the like innkeeper or gambling den owner or whatever that guy is, who goes like, "Oh, the samurai are always trying to borrow money."
Yep, selling their swords. Yep.
Yeah, right, exactly.
The ultimate betrayal of your code, selling your sword, right?
Ugh.
I would never sell my sword. Unless it was to go kill a total dickhead.
That's right. In order to join a total massacre squad.
I wanted to say real quick, I just remembered this because I've been trying to learn how to read Japanese, and I looked at the kanji for this movie called 13 Assassins, and it says, literally from what I looked up the kanji, because I only knew the opening kanji for 13 and people. So it says 13 people, no, and then it says, so like you would think that would be assassins, and I know the word for assassin, and it's not assassin. So I looked it up, and the two kanji, so roughly translated here, stab customer. Is what it says. 13 stab customers. I thought that was so cool.
That's amazing. Wow, I love that.
I said to Jen, I was like, and I don't know this. This is me speaking out of my ass, but I would assume it's probably something similar to like we have the word assassin in English, but we also have like hitman, which is like our sort of more modern way. And I would assume that's maybe a more modern way of saying assassin in Japanese. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sort of an idiom kind of thing.
Yeah. Stab customers.
Sure. Hey, I think 13 stab customers is even better. So Shinza's nephew, he leaves after this discussion, and a group tries to take him out while he's walking home because they say, oh, you met with Shinza, you must be part of the group. Mm-hmm. And he does quickly dispatch them, except for one who he does show mercy to, which again does feel like it's kind of breaking away from the samurai tradition.
Okay, so this is a moment where you said that, and I was like, I do not remember watching that earlier because you watched an extended cut of this movie, did you not?
Oh, yes.
And I believe this was an extended scene because in my movie, he does not do any cool killing until later.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So a little peek behind the curtains here, folks. When Paul recommended this to me, I went and got a copy of it. That was the international version because I was like, let me watch as much of this as possible. And I felt like that was probably the one that was like the common version. But turns out the like subtitles for that literally don't exist for the deleted scenes that got put back in. So instead I shifted to the regular version. So there are a few moments like this one clearly where it was like, oh, they're just doing a thing that's not in the normal version.
That's an interesting scene, though, because later on we have the moment where, who is it that, I don't remember the name of the young samurai.
Right.
But when he has his first kill, Shinro goes up to him, and I think that's an interesting scene to have seen earlier that he has killed, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know I guess maybe this is his first kills, maybe?
It seems possible to me. And yeah, he goes home and he tells his wife, I'm leaving and burn a torch for me at the Festival of the Dead.
Oh, and then that beautiful walk off into that moonlit street. Oh.
Yeah.
I've seen complaints of this movie that I want to address right now about it being slow for the first hour and 15 minutes, or in the 2-hour version, that is.
Yeah.
Before you get to the action sequence. I think this movie is so beautiful and so filled with incredible details that it's hard to be bored.
Yeah.
You know, I noticed something for the first time today. When you first see Naritsugu, he's peeing in a pee tube with one of his little retainers holding a pee tube for him. I didn't even pick up on that the first time I watched it because there was so much to look at on the screen.
Yeah, he literally makes them hold his piss.
Unbelievable. The guy looks in it too. Like I was like, what is the thing? Like making sure he did a good job? What's going on here?
They also bring in this young pup samurai that we've been talking about, and another Ronin who needs $200 up front, which I thought was really funny.
Yeah.
And now they're at 12.
I love that sequence. I think it's really funny too. What really warmed my heart this time is that he talks about needing 30 ryo to get a proper burial for his wife who suffered at his hands, which he admits to. And then he says 20 ryo for himself, which I thought that was sweet. He got his wife something a little bit nicer for himself.
Yeah.
He was like, I can cut corners on myself.
A little extra juice for her. It's a really fun scene. And I also love a training montage, and then we get a great one here.
Oh, there's so many good little montages through this. This one's great because you get a great speech about doing anything necessary, right?
That's right. No sword, use a stick. No stick, use a rock. No rock, use your fists and feet. Lose your life, but make the enemy pay.
Just
it's great.
I don't think American action movies would ever portray it like this. I think this would be considered too brutal, right? Mm-hmm. For an American hero to do. Yeah,
throw your life away, but at the expense of taking them down with you.
We would never do that. We would never allow that type of uncontrolled fervor to accomplish your mission.
Yeah. I think it's also really interesting that it does come back later, but he kind of toys with the idea that there's no such thing as unfair in a fight.
Right. And it definitely comes back in the final true fight that comes back for us later, too, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. Naritsugu is finally leaving, and the team elects for guerrilla tactics instead of direct confrontation, smartly. Mm-hmm. And Hanbei comes to visit, and he talks with Shinza, says he was envious of him and joined Naritsugu to catch up. And they argue about serving a master versus serving the people. And basically they just say, all right, buddy, see you on the road.
See you in hell. I love those sequences in a movie. Like, I love, because he's there, it's late at night, he shows up, he drops in unannounced, surprises him.
Yeah.
And
everyone's like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, everyone's hiding in their little spots, like, ready to strike. And these two are just like, they know. There's no secret. He knows that guys are hanging out right there, you know? Like, they're acting like they're hiding something, but they both know what's going on. And, like, it couldn't be more plain about their plans. It's just like, what don't you know about my plan, right? What's the little thing that I'm holding it back from you that you haven't figured out yet?
Absolutely. I love it. It's really effective here. I also really love that they kind of lay this theme out in advance for you to kind of chew on as the movie unfolds. This idea of the samurai concept of Bushido, that honor and valor are better leveraged by people who have a strong sense of agency, because the alternative is willing victims who have no problem sacrificing others to uphold an oath to a tyrant.
And I think that's an interesting, and I don't know, again, enough about Japanese culture to question if that's something that they question themselves, but I feel like that's almost like a American pragmatism versus like a very rigid Japanese structure, right? Again, this from an American perspective, I think like the Hanbei sticking to probably what you would expect from a samurai, right? Don't ask questions. Do honor above all. You always say yes, and you always listen to the Lord, right? And that's what we're here for. Whereas Shinzemon is sort of like almost like a Western type of mindset where it's like, no, you need to make a moment by moment analysis of what you're choosing and choose what's best for everyone else.
Yeah,
what's best for the greater whole, which is, I think, it is a Japanese mindset, and probably, I don't know if it's a more modern, but I think like the Japanese mindset, right, is like we are a society, and what's best for all of us is what matters, right?
Yeah. And I think even the idea that Hanbei is constantly feeling conflicted, you see him be like, I really don't think we should do this.
Whole time. From the first scene you see him where he's like, oh, it's like he's babysitting a brat, you know?
Yeah,
and like he is, but like a murderous brat.
Right. And Shinza and company have Makino issue an order forbidding Naratsugu from passing through, which limits his options to some passes that go through Ochai where they'll strike. Mm-hmm. They're ambushed again by Akashi henchmen. Funny that he literally calls them henchmen. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, you got to know you're a villain when you got henchmen instead of employees.
Are we the baddies?
Yeah, exactly. Nobody is hurt, but they think Hanbei is just kind of feeling them out, trying to get them to expend their energy. Mm-hmm. And this is where the young guy starts freaking out about his first kill. We have it's a great fight sequence. I think it does a nice job because we have a couple bursts, like you said, of violence throughout to get your blood boiling a little bit, right? Like a little simmer going. And like this is where like literally a little samurai. Good God, that's wonderful. They decide to get off the road to avoid any further attacks. They say they're going to go through the woods. Leech scene, grody as fuck.
Gotta have a leech scene. This is, in my opinion, reference to Stand By Me, and I'm not going to say that it wasn't. I will not take no other explanations. That was purely a Stand By Me reference.
Co-signed. Yeah, that's really grody, but it is kind of funny that it is counterbalanced by these beautiful landscapes that they're passing through.
Oh, incredible. Some of the, the way the camera pans up and you see these mountains rolling into each other. Beautiful scenery. And I don't know. It's
beautiful. It's a beautiful movie.
It's a beautiful movie. And again, slow moments, but like, how can you not be just taking in these shots and just enjoy it and just visually like feasting on this movie?
You know, it's not like it's so like stodgy or anything either. Like, there are some laughs that are happening throughout the whole thing, especially this moment where they go out to like buy out the town to fortify it, and the Lord literally falls over at the site of the deposit,
stands up, drops back, this is our deposit, right? And he's like, oh my God. They buy out this mining town, or I guess lumber town, right? Mountain lumber town, as essentially their
base,
base and their murder capital that they're setting up.
Murder capital, Japan. The rest of the men are wandering the mountains, and they come across a trapped Koyoda Kiga, who he says is samurai stock, who was left behind for seducing the boss's wife, but he'll be their guide for food. And this guy is really interesting. Obviously, there's a lot to discuss about him at the very, very end.
Yeah.
But also, he does kind of function as an antithesis to Naratsugu and his sort of well-manicured bloodlust. Like, this guy doesn't use like bladed weapons or anything, and he's gross and foresty and everything. He's got black teeth.
Yeah, he's Toshiro Mifune's character, right, in Seven Samurai,
Right.
pushed to probably an extreme.
Kikuchiyo. Yes.
Kikuchiyo, yes, yeah. It's definitely, I feel like it was definitely like, that's this character almost, but it's even more removed. Doesn't even, whereas I think Kikuchiro wants to be a samurai, wants to be accepted. This character, Koyata, no desire to be fit in or be accepted by this samurai culture.
Yeah, Kikuchiyo, he was a fake, but he was peasant stock, they say, and a more of like a force of nature who was distinguished by his less restrained emotionality and recklessness. This definitely feels like an homage to that, sort of pulling that character forward as well, I feel like. Naratsugu reaches the blockade and he's turned away, much to his fury. Hanbei tries to convince him to be smart, but Naratsugu says, choose the foolish path. It's more fun that way.
And this is the first moment where we start to see, like, because we see him murderous and we see him being wicked, right?
Yeah.
But this is the first time that we see, like, oh, this dude is just like, doesn't have any emotions. This dude's
nihilist,
numb.
kind of.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, and that makes his character way scarier. I think this moment makes his character scarier in a certain way where you're like, oh, he has no regards for anyone's life, including his own.
Yeah, I mean, he's so diminishing of the people around him too. Hanbei's like commitment to Bushido and everything is like laughable to him. He's like trying to see how far he can push it.
Yep. Again, like a child who's acting out, right?
Yes,
like
yes, exactly.
He's almost like views him as like this restraint on him that he doesn't believe should be there, and he has to test the boundaries however he can, whenever he can.
Exactly. The lads make it out of the forest and to the town where they learn that Makino committed harakiri to take the blame and cover their tracks, and they commit to finish in his name, turning the boarding town into a town of death.
Oh my god! And then we get this another great montage.
Build that town up.
Build that town up. There's all kinds of preparations going on. We don't know what's happening, and the montage does not let you know the scale of what they're pulling off. Which I think is great. I think it's good they hold back on that.
It's funny that they do hold back on that, especially when it then cuts to them being like, "Wow, we've had a lot of time to like set things up." They're like, "We're bored. Where is this guy?"
Yeah, they're tapping their fucking fingers on the table, like being like, "Where is he? Like, he's not showing up." And they're. I love that they're like, maybe we should leave it. And it's like, when we see what they have accomplished in this time, the fact that they ever considered moving, in my mind, is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, it really is. Naratsugu, he's vanished off the path. They are worried he's not going to follow their predictions. And this is where we get that amazing shot of them all on the roofs that I sent you. And I was like, this fucking movie.
The Total Massacre Squad just chilling out. It's beautiful. It's such a... it reminds me of Ozu, where he has all those shots of just like the roof.
Yes.
The scattered rooftops. And like, I love those shots. And he's not the only director to do it, but I think his shots of that have always been like some of my favorite shots in Japanese cinema. And this definitely gives me that vibe. But with cool samurai chilling on it, which makes it even cooler.
Even better. And like you said, Shinza kind of... he is soft and caring and gentle with the people around him, but he's kind of like this steel hand in a velvet glove.
Yes. Well, he says, you have all committed your lives to me and I will spend them how I see fit,
Yeah.
Like, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit there, but it's pretty much that. He's basically like, I will kill you. I will use your life if it will get us, if it will advance our goal and our mission.
Definitely. And he also cautions them to be patient. You got to wait for the fish to swallow the hook. I love
the fishing throughout. I love whenever someone sees him, I picked up his little tick of saying "in the flesh." It's like a little line that he throws out, and I love that. Yeah. The little character details that they seed for him are just very economical. We get like a little bit of stuff, but we totally understand who this person is. He's a fisherman, like he has the patience of a fisherman, and he uses that patience as his greatest weapon. Yeah. It absolutely plays even into what Hanbei was saying about his not being able to be baited out into making a mistake. Mm-hmm. That he'll wait you out. He'll wait out the fish. He gets the fish. Now, Shinza does suspect that Hanbei has convinced the group to skip visiting the Negi clan, which is what they wanted them to do. But he knows that 70 men can't travel unnoticed and says they'll come when they think it's safe. Yep.
And turns out they are coming, but it's not 70 men. It's over 200.
Over 200. I love this turn. So this movie's like going along, and there's little twists and turns and stuff like that. And you know, there's a couple moments where you're like, is it going to work out? But things seem to be progressing pretty well. You know, the attack by the hired henchman is a surprise, a pretty good surprise. Obviously, like the disappearance, the moment when they do disappear is a pretty good surprise. And and it's fun because it's the head games that are being played, and you're in the Shinza headspace, right? But I love this turn where it's like they're expecting 70 men. All right, 13 of us, we probably can handle it. Let's do the math. We each got to kill, you know, a couple guys.
Yeah, right.
But then we find out about the 200, to which Jen, when the massacre starts, they kill about 70 of them right off the bat. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but we'll go back to it. There's 130 left. She's like, it's only 10 guys each. And I was like, Jen, I just looked at Jen. I said, Jen, could you kill 10 men?
After having already killed those other guys, they're tired.
Yeah. And she cracked up at that moment. She's like, no, I could not kill 10 men. And I think the gravity of the situation really set in for her there.
Yeah, 200's a lot.
It's a lot of men.
I also love this moment where he's like ready to die, and they all say yes in unison, and you're just like, oh yeah, gang's all here, baby. And dudes rock.
They keep doing these cool dude moments, and they keep happening, and you keep being like, yeah, fuck yeah. And then we're not even at the best one yet.
That's right. They all take their positions in hiding. Hanbei rolls into town to check things out. All he finds is a little kid staring directly at him while he pees.
Piss Boy was paid to do that piss, and Piss Boy totally nailed it and
delivered.
Completely put them at ease with his tiny little pee he does.
Yeah, it is very funny, and it does convince Hanbei that things are safe for their passage. He's like, if this kid is out here pissing in the middle of the road. But he does eventually spot the trap, but it's too late. The bridge is blown, and Naratsugu says, oh, fuck yeah, let's go, and rides into town.
Mm-hmm.
Choose the foolish path. It's more fun.
The foolish path.
Now, this is where we get this huge battle sequence. It is very long, so I'm not going to try and cover every single moment.
Mm-hmm.
I will throw out a few highlights. You can feel free to throw out a few of your favorites if they don't get covered. First one, lighting bulls on fire and using them as battering rams down an alley.
When Jen saw that moment, she was like, what the fuck? Like, that was the moment for her that the movie went into a new gear of reality, right? And it is. Flaming bulls, psychological warfare is some of the wildest shit you're going to see. It's an incredible moment, and I love this. I love this portion of the action sequence, which is, again, the psychological, like, we're going to put fear into the hearts of all of these men so that they're shaken for when the actual fighting starts.
Absolutely. They blow up a building on top of them.
Mm-hmm. They blow the building explosion is incredible. And before they even let the bulls out, giant bramble walls fly out, like spring-trapped bramble walls. And, like, don't question how these walls are flying out. Do not.
Who cares?
Who cares? We are in this for the total massacre squad to go off, and we're in it, baby.
Well, speaking of the total massacre, he pulls out this command from the top of the bramble wall, and
I love the build up to it because we have this terror portion of the attack, and things are happening, and like you think it started, right? You think this is the beginning of it, but no, this was just like the tune-up, right, to the battle. This was just like, we were just like prepping you guys, you know, like, all right, now the orchestra can play.
Yeah.
And we've established the stakes. We've shown how everybody's reacting to the situation. The whole time that they're doing all of this stuff, my favorite part is Koji Yakusho's performance of standing with his hands behind his back, watching as all of his assassins are attacking and jumping around and jumping from roof to roof, stands perfectly still. They deliver a short speech, and then, yes, George, they pull out the calligraphy from earlier. Total massacre. And you might have forgotten about it, but the callback is beautiful, baby. It is a wonderful callback. This is the moment I was watching it with Kevin. I think he was into the movie already, but he was just, I remember Kevin Cole saying, fuck yeah.
He's fucking right. I said fuck yeah, too.
It was a fuck yeah moment. I get chills when that happens. It's so cool. It's so dude. It's so dad. I don't care. I'm here for it.
It's really incredible. You know, it really feels like he's throwing the gauntlet And Naritsugu, he's into it. You know, he smirks at Hanbei's "it's a trap." He chooses the foolish path yet again.
Yep.
People are dual wielding swords. They're shooting arrows.
They're knocking arrows out of the air with the sword. I love when that happens.
Hell yeah. Unfortunately, there are too many Akashi men, and the assassins start to fall. Sad.
The first, I noticed this today, and I don't know if I'd have to watch it again to really check the details on this, but the town is being blown up and sort of broken up by the initial fighting, but you don't see a lot of blood on the ground until the first samurai. The town almost begins to bleed after the first samurai gets struck. That's when the real blood starts to flow. And I thought that was so interesting that like they're like killing all these people. They kill 70 men, but you really don't see too much like viscera and blood like flowing on the ground. But as soon as that first samurai slice happens on one of our 13 assassins, the town begins to bleed, and you start seeing flows of blood appearing everywhere. And I thought that was such a cool, just like holding back on that to like really raise the level of visceralness and to make it feel desperate at that moment.
Definitely. I think it also plays into what he was saying earlier about the difference between sort of a Hollywood level of violence and the type of violence that he's going for, where it does feel like instead of these nameless people being just the blood that coats the floor, it feels much more intense because it's the blood from the people that we're behind.
Yeah.
That this is now a test of endurance for them.
Yeah.
I think it really works well.
When the river turns to blood, I believe that is from one of our samurai falling into the river, right? And then that's when the river changes from water to blood.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. There's even a blood explosion around a minute or an hour and 30 seconds.
The blood explosion was such a... It surprised me again today. I was like, oh my God, I forgot a guy explodes and shoots a 30-foot geyser of blood into the air.
Old Faithful, baby.
Dude, I just want to go back to that house explosion. I think that effect looks great and it's terrifying.
Yes.
It's a landslide of a like 2 or 3 story building on top of a ton of men. And it is a scale and a scope that you don't expect this battle to get to, I don't think, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, the camera work really helps with this, where it is kind of like putting you in their perspective a little bit. I think they do a great job. And Naritsugu loves what's going on. He calls it magnificent. You know, he says, with death comes gratitude for life.
Yep.
And he wants to bring back the Age of War once he's on the council. Again, this is where sort of the occasional handheld moment gets really close up. There's a little wobble, which I think helps to make things feel shaky, literally.
Yep.
And as the assassins drop, each takes a whole heap of guys with them until all that's left is Shinza and his nephew. Hanbei goes to duel. Fun conversation between them where Shinza and Hanbei each try to like convince the other to just let them win. And then Shinza cleans his sword like a fucking cool guy.
Oh my God, I love that moment. It's just a cool moment. He's just like, all right, we're going to do this. Fucking does the arm, just shows off a little bicep, shows a little sep to the crowd, and slides that blood off. Oh, it's beautiful.
It really is. And the battle begins. I love that Hanbei is like, wow, I missed crossing swords with you. And Shinza is like, this isn't even my final form. We were evenly matched in the dojo, but there's no fucking honor in a death battle. Like we said earlier, this comes back into play. Kick some mud right into Hanbei's eye.
Some little face mud. It's like it's next level pocket sand, right? Pocket sand is dry and gets everywhere. This is a visceral guck of mud into the face.
It's nasty, and he quickly beheads him with a "see you in hell." It's great.
This movie has a lot of. I've watched it so many times, and I pick up on different vibes depending on who I'm watching it with. And I remember watching it one time with a couple of different friends, and really picking up on like how like kind of tropey this movie is. You know, it's hitting action movie tropes, and like, but I still think it's so tastefully done that it's okay. Like I'm like okay with the tropey moments. I'm okay with the "see you in hell" line. You know, like it's fine because again, we're here for the dude action.
Hell yeah. I think that the knowing what's happening, the idea that he's sort of leaning into the tropes of it because it is look, 2010 is a pretty modern movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that using these influences is part of what I love about it, that it is sort of paying homage to not just the samurai movies that came before, but also some of the action movies from America, maybe that influenced it with these one-liners and everything. I think it does such a great job of keeping the modern sensibility while still feeling like a throwback.
Right. Hey, I think this did that, and I think Harakiri did as well. And I think it's interesting to, again, it's like this weird dichotomy that it exists in of like both lovingly looking at the samurai myth, but also being like, it wasn't honor. It wasn't all honor. There was people kicking mud in people's faces, Yeah. It's like not that this movie did what Unforgiven did, but it's like in that same vibe, right? Where it's like, hey, like these weren't all great men who were there to save the innocent prairie folk, like it's like, yeah, I think it's such an interesting space for this movie to exist in, and it exists within the movie itself between the two characters, right? Like looking at this code and being like, this code can go, if you just strictly uphold this code, it's wrong, Yeah,
definitely. Naratsugu kicks the head, and Shinza is like, what the fuck, dude? Naratsugu says, kick my head if you like.
Naratsugu, total creep, total freak. But sometimes he says something and you're like, hey, he's consistent, so I gotta respect that.
Yeah, there's look, we'd be lying if I said there was no charisma behind it.
I know. When he says life is given meaning through death, you're like, fuck, you're right. God damn, you had to be right this time.
Oh man, and well, this is when Shinza says ruling is convenient, but only for rulers. And you're like, fuck yeah, Shinza. A time must come when the servants rise up, and Shinza walks right into Naratsugu's blade, impaling himself to get right in there and impale Naratsugu too. And of course, there is also an element of his understanding that his crime was a death sentence to start with, so better to die in battle here, get that honorable death, while still completing the mission as well.
So in that moment watching that today, he does when he accepts the mission, he says, this is great. This is a chance for me to die honorably. And a thing I didn't think I had a chance to do anymore in the world we live in. And in this moment, he gets that. You can tell like the plan was, I was supposed to die. I was wondering, do you think he was going to die? Do you think he thought he was going to die in that fight before it? Did you think that like maybe his plan was that I will take this person down, we will have our honorable death here, and then my nephew will finish the job?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, look, I think that definitely feels possible. I think part of it to me is just his adaptability and his individual agency is part of what makes him such an interesting character and what makes him willing to take on this mission in the first place. And I think that his knowing that this is the end for him kind of is what lets him get to the end of it. That he is like willing to take the chances, willing to do the ultimate gamble. They talk about several times is like betting on yourself is the hardest thing to do kind of thing. I don't know that he even had planned it out that far. I think he was like, let's see how the battle shakes out.
Yeah, I mean, okay, that's a great point. It's like almost as if he wanted that death, right? Just like he wanted to succeed in this mission. And he was going to do that no matter what. But he wasn't going to overplay his hand because he wanted that thing.
Exactly. Yeah,
so he waited. He like you said, he was adaptable until the very end when he decided, this is my moment. This is the perfect moment to get what I want. I have reached the Rubicon where if I get past this, I will succeed, and I can take what I need right now.
Right, succeed at both at once. If he had overplayed his hand, he might have gotten one or the other.
Right.
But by being willing to be patient and willing to wait for the fish to swallow the bait, he gets both at once in this ultimate coup for himself.
Oh, so great. And he gets to finish him off. Did you want to read off how he finishes him off? Because I love
Yeah, it is great. He crawls away in the mud, scared and dying, while Shinza is supported by his nephew, and he thanks Shinza for this being the most exciting day of his life.
Unbelievable. So thanks him, and then when he realizes he's dying, does he say it before it? Because he has the, like, I'm scared. Oh, no, he does, because he says it's the fear that makes him, he finally feels alive, right? The impending death is making his life feel real for once, right?
That's right. Yeah, and then he gets fucking chop it in the neck.
Chop it in the neck into the poopy room. I was waiting for his head to roll down that hole into the toilet space. It's like I choose to read it that he was crawling up not only in mud but poop and piss.
Hell yeah.
Of that,
Hell yeah.
in the lowest he could be at that moment, you know?
Absolutely. And Shinza says, being a samurai is truly a burden as he lays dying. Do what you want with your life, he says to his nephew.
I love that.
Hell yeah. And the nephew, he wanders into the wreckage. He's unsure what to do. And there he runs into the 13th assassin, Kyoto, somehow not only alive, but basically unhurt.
Mm-hmm. Who, we skipped over his death scene. He gets a sword thrown at him by Naratsugu through his throat.
Yeah.
And then
dead.
And then is slashed open. He is dead. Like, Jen was like, he's dead, right? And I was like, oh, he was dead. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And he shows up. He says, I'm off to reunite with Upashi until the next life, he says. And there are a couple of theories here related to how he's back. I'm curious, do you want to throw out what you think first, or should I throw out a couple of ideas and then we can just discuss them as they come out?
Let's do that.
All right. So the first idea is that he is a forest demon, which plays into where he was found, because in Japanese stories, mountains are often magical places where spirits, demons, and the living all coexist. This also plays into his choice of weaponry, which is also very natural. A lot of like branches and stones and stuff. Yeah. Additionally, this would also play into a bit of interesting moralizing, where a demon is more moral than a noble who abuses their power. Another theory is that he is Wukong, the Monkey King, who was trapped by the Buddha in a mountain used as stocks with just his head and hands poking out before getting freed and helping in the journey to the west.
Okay, cool.
There's a third theory that he's sort of like the dead men of Dunharrow from Lord of the Rings, where he's sort of fulfilling the broken honor of a past life that he was kicked out of the group for in a fight.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And then one final theory, and this is the one that I personally think is the most likely, is that he is actually still dead, but so is the nephew, and their spirits are on their way to their just rewards for their deeds. You know, for example, Kyoto gets reunited with Upashi, like he says, and having now seen his uncle finish the mission, he doesn't interact with really anything, the nephew here. He can go have the life of freedom from responsibility that he wanted. You know, he says, I'm going to become the greatest bandit in Japan and then go to America, before slowly walking into the camera. And I think that this sort of plays back into when we see him walk away out of the frame saying, you know, light the torch for me at the Festival of the Dead.
Yeah.
That this is him sort of going into the afterlife as a reward for this honorable death that he just got. Again, very much like the Northman.
Yeah, absolutely. I subscribe to the he is an immortal being school of thought. Probably, I would say Mountain Spirit is probably the thing that I thought the most. Because I really feel like I pick up on the fantasy vibes at this point, right? And that's just sort of, that's sort of where I was coming at it from. I think the son does live. I think a record of the day is carried out to the world, you know, like a witness to everything that we've seen is carried out into the world. And I think he represents, right?
Like the guy from earlier who said that he didn't kill himself because he wanted to be a witness.
And I think that what his uncle says to him about stop being a samurai, go live your life, don't let this code tell you who you have to be in a time when this code no longer makes any sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, we see literally over 200 samurai murdering each other, pretty much needlessly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's like the final hurrah, which the movie, I think the way the postscript sort of lays it out too, is like, this happened. He was reported, this Naratsugu was reported as having died from an illness. And
pathetic.
With a pathetic. I loved your review on Letterboxd of this, that you wanted the reverse to happen in the case of your own death. So that was brilliant.
That's right. Hey, I'm sure that I'll just fall victim to some illness eventually. Tell them I went out fighting Total Massacre Squad.
The stab customers came for me. 13 stab customers came at me.
Damn those stab customers.
Oh my god! I think that this is the last hurrah of the samurai, and it does say like within a couple decades that the Meiji
23 years later,
the Meiji era comes in, right?
Right, the Restoration and the Shogun era ends. Yeah, it really is the last gasp of the samurai.
Yeah, I think that this is like, I think that's what it is. I think he's the new generation, right? And they need to wash off.
Hell yeah!
Through a trial of blood. the past. And isn't that just the way? We have the death. We have to deal with the violent death throes of old, stodgy ways of living
Definitely.
over and over again.
Yeah, I really like the text epilogue. I think it does a really great job of kind of making his life feel worthless.
Mm-hmm.
not the nephew, Naratsugu's life.
Yes.
And in my opinion, this does sum things up really well. It's kind of like a political system focused on upholding the status quo by its very nature is too narcissistic and trapped by political ambitions to use its moral authority for public good and should be excised with the Total Massacre Squad as the scalpel.
Yep. Beautiful. Well said.
And now, Paul, we've reached the part of the episode where we sum up not why this is the best horror movie ever made, but just why we found this to be an interesting and great movie. You know, we don't have to be so confined by genre or even the best. You're certainly welcome to say how much you enjoy it, but yeah, just sort of sum up your thoughts on it and why you wanted to talk about this movie today.
Well, like I said, I think that this movie hits a spot that I don't think a lot of movies. I like a lot of like more cerebral or like, I don't know, poetic movies, I guess. Like I do typically like, I'm not usually like an action movie person, you know?
Yeah.
But this movie, I grew up watching action movies. Starship Troopers was a favorite of mine. RoboCop was a favorite of mine. You know, Die Hard was a favorite of mine. So like, I grew up watching those movies and I loved them. And there was a point in my life where I think I kind of turned away from that type of cinema, thinking it was like lesser, you know, when I started like studying movies in like college and stuff like that and like watching older stuff where I was like, oh, like action movies, whatever. And then I kind of, as I got older, I was like, no, I love this stuff. I love this genre of film. So like when I see a good action movie, it just hits a spot that I don't think, you know, any other type of movie can hit. And this movie I think is so great because there are great moments of action in the beginning of it, but I love the slow buildup because, again, it's like two different movies. It's like a heist movie, and then it becomes an action movie, right?
Yeah,
like you get
right.
and you get like the satisfaction of like those two genres kind of bad, and like a little bit of horror spiced in there. It has a lot of flavors in it, and I like that. And again, I think it's beautiful. I think the performances are great, and I just want to watch these 13 guys do Total Massacre over and over again.
Hell yeah. To me, this is such an interesting movie and worth talking about because at the very beginning, I read that quote from Miike where he talks about the timelessness of these period pieces. And I think he really nailed it because the idea that group efforts can pressure people into compromising their values is not something that has gone away, you know? And I think that the idea that we can each reaffirm our spirit by accepting honor as more of a code for individual responsibility and not sycophantic devotion is something that's really important. You know, it's a really interesting question of agency. And I can't help thinking, especially in swing state PA, me personally, not speaking for Paul, getting shamed into voting for Biden instead of with my conscience and good old Howie Hawkins because of a sense of duty. Like I had to contribute to this, you know, it's, I don't have the answer. I don't know if my one vote would have been the thing that would have tipped it over the other way or not. But I know that I feel worse about myself when I see all the things that I don't agree with that Biden is still doing. And I say, well, at least I could have been true to myself and voted with the thing that I agreed with. And I think that that is something that this movie is really questioning is what are you willing to do to be true to yourself and to be true to what you think is right? And the fact that this is a movie taking place in 1844 Japan, and I very easily feel like it applies to my 2022 life here in the United States, is something that is remarkable about it.
Yeah. Yep.
Plus, great performances, wild violence, an amazing battle sequence that is simultaneously very long and also the perfect length.
It is so perfectly balanced.
Yes.
It really understands the need to stop every now and then. It never gets to a point, it maybe approaches a point of numbness occasionally throughout it, right, to the violence. But I think it does such a good job of balancing these moments of quiet somehow within this mayhem. It balances a couple moments of quiet to get you to like breathe, reestablish stakes, reestablish place. It's just, I think, masterfully orchestrated. A freaking Ronin does a dance of swords where there is just a field of swords stuck out of the ground, and he just says, "Kill any that get behind me." and then goes on a dance of death and just is pulling swords out of the ground and slicing one-shotting dudes left and right.
Oh, yeah.
Incredible sequence. And that's one of many beautiful action sequences throughout this this sequence. Yeah, you're right. It's both. It somehow is perfectly long, but also incredibly long at the same time.
Yeah, they really let you soak in it, and it's just great stuff the whole way through. Great movie. Thank you for introducing it to me, Paul.
I'm very glad you liked it, and I'm glad I loved what you had to say about it. I think this movie does have some bite to it beyond just the action, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this movie could be watched sort of how we watched Starship Troopers, where you could watch it purely as an action movie and be like, that was fun. But you can also look at it and go, wow, it really makes you think.
Wow, it does make you think.
Really makes you think.
Wow, it really does. And
No, it does.
Paul, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This was an absolute blast. Like I said, I love the movie, and I love. This is part of what I love about the show is getting to experience new things and see why people love these movies. So, really, I think this was a great one. And tell the people where they can check out your other stuff, which is all great.
Sure. I just want to say thank you again for having me on. You have been gracious enough to let me talk on your show multiple times now. And I think it's very nice of you. And I love that we had this experience. I'm so glad you liked it because you show someone a movie and they could potentially dislike it, which would be fine. I would have been okay if you said, Paul, this is not a good movie. We'll talk about why. But I really am glad you liked it. And I think we had a really special experience here in that you recommended a movie to me that I loved. And I got to recommend a movie to you that you really liked. And I think in a time where media is so fractured, it's really hard sometimes to truly have an exchange of, like, I really like this thing, watch it, and someone else does that back. And I'm glad we got to do that because it's very rare. I think a lot of times we're kind of in our own little worlds experiencing our experiences and we tell each other about them and that's about all we get. So it's nice to have this connection with you. I really appreciate that.
Hell yeah, absolutely. And since he didn't actually do any plugging, I will say, check out Goosebuds and Continue show on YouTube. It's delightful. Goosebuds, amazing podcast. Kevin Cole, who we've talked about, Chad Quant has also been on the show. He's part of that. I've been a guest on the show, so that's a perfect place to start.
It's a great episode.
All kinds of great stuff.
That is a great episode that you're on. I had a blast talking about that book. So
Me too.
If you want to check something out, check that episode out. What is it? What was the name?
How to Kill a Monster.
How to Kill a Monster. Yes, How to Kill a Monster.
Very fun one. So yeah, check all that stuff out. And you're already a patron here if you're hearing it. So you're already good on this end. So just go check out Paul's stuff. That's it, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.